Every day, millions of people go online to search for local businesses. Does your small business show up? When you create a website on WordPress.com, you make it easier for your customers to find you, to connect with you, to hear how you can help them. Your business needs an online home. It needs a WordPress.com website. You don't need experience setting up websites. WordPress guides you through the process from start to finish. They take care of the technical stuff, so it's easy to get your site up and running. Their customer support team is made up of WordPress experts eager to help you get the most from your site. They're available to help 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and weekends. Plans start at just $4 a month, and all WordPress plans include a custom domain name for the life of the plan. Come see why 28% of all websites run on WordPress. Get started today with 15% off any new plan purchase. Go to WordPress.com/Golic to create your website and find the plan that's right for you. That's WordPress.com/Golic for 15% off your brand new website. WordPress.com/Golic.
And Cliff is trying to keep us awake.
Like that a lot.
That's like a fresh hit of Jolt Cola. Right there.
Jolt Cola.
You remember Jolt Cola?
Yes, I certainly do.
All the sugar and twice the caffeine.
Yeah, just what everybody needs.
Woo! That'll wake you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Glad you're with us on Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio and ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Lots to get to. Brian Windhorst, our ESPN NBA insider, will join us a little bit to talk about what Isaiah Thomas's return, or beginning rather, with the Cleveland Cavaliers means to that team going forward. We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll also talk a little football, a lot of things going on there, and talk a little bit more about our interview with John Gruden.
Yes,
where he seemed to make it pretty clear he gets the job. He's going if he's offered the job, he's going to take the job. And there were some parameters that were discussed about that job that may not be actually true. We'll get into all that a little bit later. But let's start with what's trending. And nothing is trending more than Vegas.
When is
Vegas not trending?
I love Vegas, and now you have another reason to love Vegas.
The Vegas Golden Knights won their 8th straight game on Tuesday, 3-0 over the Preds. According to Elias, they became only the only major North American pro sports franchise to win 8 straight games at any point in their inaugural season over the last 40 seasons.
Yeah, the last one, the Denver Nuggets, won 8 straight from October 22nd and November 9th in 76 in their first NBA season. So very impressive with what they're doing, and they're beating some of the big boys. They're 7-0 this season.
Well, the Preds,
when they faced the Final Four from last year's Stanley Cup playoffs, they're 17-2-1 at home. They're second in points only to Tampa Bay in the NHL. And I know the capacity, Hembo was telling me, the capacity in their arena is like third least, right? Or something like that. Third fewest,
smallest?
As far as smallest.
Any of those words would work?
But they're getting people there. I mean, people, because that was the wonder. You know, when the Raiders go there, it's eight home games.
Right.
And home games in the NFL, it's like an event because there's only 8 of them. And an event in Vegas, are you kidding me? I mean, seriously, you can't. To me, I think it's going to be incredibly successful. But when you start talking about, you know, a sport with 82 games, so 41 home games, you're like, well, okay. But again, the arena's smaller, and they're getting some good turnout there, and the team is playing incredibly well. So I think it's fantastic. I'm so happy, Trey, that we're past the stigma of, oh, my God, we can't have sports in Vegas. Yeah. Do you know what goes on there? Yeah. Yes, we all know what goes on there, and you can have pro sports in Vegas, and you can deal with it. You know, it's not like once you have it, oh, my God, everything shady in the world is going to happen. So I'm so happy that it not only it's there, but it's doing as well as it's doing right now.
Well, to that point, part of the funding for the new football stadium is going to come from a hotel tax.
Yeah.
What is in most hotels in Las Vegas?
Casinos.
A casino.
Yes.
So, you know, and what's in most casinos? A sports book.
I couldn't believe when I started hearing, wait a minute, the NFL, what are the players going to do? All they're going to be doing, they're going to go into the sports book and bet on their games. They're going to be hanging around the casinos all night long. No, they're not. No, they're not. You may have a few.
If they are, they're losing.
You may have a few knuckleheads here and there that are going to find their way out of the league but you learn how to be a professional, you know, and you take responsibility for that. I think it's fantastic that pro sports are going there, and boy, the Golden Knights, what an incredible start for their inaugural season.
Again, 17-2-1 at home. So we'll see whether home field carries out for the Raiders.
Right.
Home ice is definitely working this year for the Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL. And as we said, John Gruden joined us earlier this morning and responded to the rumors, or actually reports.
Reports that he's
going to be the next head coach of the Raiders. And he said if he's offered the job, there's a good chance he'll take it. We amended that to say he's going to take it.
Yeah.
If he offered the job.
Yeah, he is basically, and then I asked him generally why, back into coaching, because we saw our own Herm Edwards go back into coaching, and you could kind of see that coming. I really saw it firsthand when I helped him coach the Under Armour All-American game.
He loved doing that,
something
man.
he'd been doing for 8 years.
That.
So in essence, he was coaching guys that now he'll be coaching on the next level. All these 4- and 5-star, high school All-Americans he's coaching in this game, and he'll be recruiting a lot of those guys now to play for him at Arizona State. And you could just tell his passion, and you could hear and see John Gruden's passion in what he does now, whether it's in the booth, whether it's at his quarterback camp, wherever it is, such passion and love for the game of football. And these coaches, man, it's just in their blood, and they want to do it, and he wants to go back and do it, and he's going to listen. And the business side of it, he's going to get paid a lot of money for it. More power to him. More power to anybody that can go get what they can get, especially if it's doing something they love, because it's not like he was hurting, working in the Monday night booth.
No.
He was able to pay the bills extremely well. So while everything isn't about money, it doesn't mean you can't go out there and make a boatload of it, which he can do as well. But this guy loves coaching. And it'd been rumored year after year after year. You go in here, your name comes up there, everybody's after you. And this year he's been as honest as ever. In the interview with us this morning, he was extremely honest about the candidates and if there's other candidates. And we asked him flat out, if you get asked, will you take it? And he said, a good chance, which we take as yes. And then you asked him as well
about the ownership.
The reports about, as part of the deal, going to be ownership. And he absolutely denied that. He said there is no part of those contract negotiations that included the ownership part of it. So he was very honest about that as well. So I'd imagine it's just a matter of time before we get the announcement that John Gruden is the next head coach of the Oakland Raiders, soon to be the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, and I loved the way he answered that question. He said it made for a good segment.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
About ownership.
Exactly.
And the other thing, too, is, he will be calling the game for us on
yes,
ESPN, which will be simulcast on ABC this weekend. Between the Titans and the Chiefs in Kansas City. So we'll see how that plays out going forward.
God, how will he be welcomed back in Oakland? Holy smokes.
Be good.
I mean, Marshawn Lynch really brought that energy with him from being from there and playing for them. But now Gruden coming back. Yeah. Man, that's just going to be fantastic.
It will be a very, very good thing. We'll see how that plays out going forward. Meanwhile, we saw how it played out last night when Isaiah Thomas finally made it his long-awaited Cleveland Cavaliers debut. 17 points in 19 minutes. And joining us to talk about it is Brian Windhorst, our ESPN NBA insider, author of 3 books, graduated from Kent State. And we'll be working tonight when the Cavs take on the Celtics at 8 on ESPN in Boston. Okay, Brian, your initial thoughts on what you saw out of Isaiah Thomas in 19 minutes of action, 17 points, basically doubling right about what the production had been for point guards for Cleveland all season long.
Yeah, the Cavs ranked 29th in scoring from their point guards up till last night, and obviously that changed. The most important thing for Isaiah, he is a guy whose entire game is built off of attacking the basket. That is how he got to who he is. And so the question is, when he comes back, will he be afraid of contact? Not only was he not afraid of contact, he got a technical foul for complaining about not getting a foul call. So that was a really good sign for the Cavs. He obviously put up a lot of points, and he obviously is another offensive weapon. They were in a slump offensively, guys. They had only been averaging about 96 points during their 3-game losing streak. He comes back. They put up 127. That wasn't the only reason. Their other guys had good nights too. But obviously he's a difference maker offensively for this team. Defensively is another story, but offensively certainly looked terrific in his first game. Came
off the bench. Certainly, everyone imagines he'll be starting at some point, but off the bench. When he was on the floor and LeBron was off the floor, they were plus 18 for that. But we know eventually they're going to be on the floor quite a bit together. So let's fast forward to when he's healthy and he's playing in the regular rotation and starting and around the playoff time. How do you see this offense running with Isaiah and LeBron on the court at the same time?
So I could make the argument, this is going to sound like a hot take, so just give me a second. I could make the argument that the Cavs' second most important player late in games, most important, is Kyle Korver. Because the way their offense operates, they really try to get Korver a lot of shots. to play off LeBron. He's vitally important for them in fourth quarters. He leads the NBA in fourth quarter three-pointers. And teams had been starting to take Korver away from them. If you go back and look at the Cavs' losses, it was nights when Korver couldn't be effective in the fourth quarter. In fact, if you looked at the Warriors' game plan on Christmas Day, I would say point 1A of their game plan was take Kyle Korver away. He only got 3 shots off. When you add Isaiah Thomas to the mix, you add a much more dynamic player than Kyle Korver, and you can play Korver with Thomas and LeBron. And so that gives them a lot more windows in a matchup situation, in a we need a basket in this half-court situation late in games. I also thought yesterday, Golick, you mentioned they're plus 18. Already I can tell you the combination of Dwayne Wade and Isaiah Thomas playing together with LeBron sitting could be pretty dynamic. But the Cavs need another unstoppable option offensively late, and that's what Isaiah gives them.
Well, Brian, just to follow up to that point, how much of a concern has it been that Korver is their second best go-to guy? What does that say?
To me, that's the biggest thing that scouts had been learning watching the Cavs recently is if in the fourth quarter you can't stop LeBron, the guy's the number one scorer in the fourth quarter in the league, so you just camp on Korver and wait for them to get bogged down. It's been happening more and more. And this is what happened with Korver in Atlanta. When Atlanta had that 60-win season, Kyle Korver was an all-star, but when they got into the playoffs, teams just sat on him and the Cavs swept them. It was the same concept that I saw the Cavs used against Korver a couple of years ago. So it was actually, they were sort of, in my opinion, dangerously relying on Kyle late. And so Isaiah coming back really gives them a window because, to be honest with you guys, they struggle to play Kevin Love. Kevin Love's having an incredible season. He's averaging 20 and 10. He's going to be an all-star. He's been great. But they struggle to put him on the court late in games because he's a liability defensively. And so they were really relying heavily on offense without Kevin Love. And teams were figuring out how to slow them down. So this brings another option. Plus, guys, they're going into the toughest portion of their schedule. They're going into the doldrums of the season. And just having Isaiah back, he's such a breath of fresh air. He's energizing. He will energize them as they get from midseason onward here. I think that's going to help them just that alone.
Well, Brian, follow up there then as we go forward now with Isaiah Thomas. Again, he's not playing tonight. They want to manage his minutes. At what point do we think he'll be out there on a regular basis and being the starting point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers?
Within days. I think it's pretty clear after seeing how he looked last night that the Cavs are protecting him today. And it's not just because they didn't, think he was ready. I think they just wanted to protect him from the emotions of what tonight might be in Boston. And not because they think he wasn't going to play well. I think the vibe that I'm getting is, they didn't want him to go to Boston and go, 2 of 15 trying to show off and get off to a bad start there. No, they didn't want him to come to Boston and try to do something crazy like dunk in the game, trying to send a message to Danny Ainge. So if you watched him play last night, clearly he could have played before yesterday. And yeah, they might drag their trainers, their doctors out and say they were being cautious. Excuse me. But it's clear they were protecting him.
Protecting him, and he wasn't ducking the Celtics?
Absolutely not. Knowing Isaiah, he would have wanted to start and jam it down their throat. But he was dunking a week ago, and I just feel like the Cavs managed this in a way where they brought him back where there was no way he could play in tonight's game. And they did that to protect him from himself because they didn't want him to come into this game and feel like he had to be Superman and then threaten injuring himself or doing something he wasn't ready for. They're going to sort of bring him back slowly and letting him, unleash, this would have been maybe a second game, might have been a little too tall of an order. So I think, again, if you watched him play last night, you can't tell me he wouldn't have been okay to play Saturday in Utah and then play his second game tonight. But the Cavs, I think it's the right thing to do. It's not like they don't have another game in Boston. They have another game in Boston in early February. It's a Saturday night ABC game. It's going to be a major event. He'll get his moment there. But I think it's clear that he was healthy enough to go. And I don't blame him for doing it. And frankly, it's probably the smart decision.
And you mentioned Superman, so I guess that brings us to James Harden. Though Superman doesn't have his cape right now, he's going to miss at least 2 weeks with the hamstring strain. This is one of those, after 2 weeks, he's going to be reevaluated, which doesn't mean he's back in 2 weeks. They've already gone for a time without Chris Paul, and they were playing, obviously, extremely well. second now in the conference to Golden State. How much are you worried about this? Not so much the initial 2 weeks, but then do you reevaluate and then the possibility of re-injury down the road?
Exactly, Golick. So Harden is a guy who would, if he had his druthers, play 48 minutes from October until April. That's who he is. That's one of the reasons why he was a leading candidate for MVP. They revealed that the MRI showed a grade 2 sprain, which means he's got a partial tear of his hamstring. And the absolute last thing you want is a torn hamstring. If he tears it, his season will be over. So they are going to have to probably put him in a restraining harness to keep him off the floor, because at the end of the day, I know that they want the number 1 seed, because their concept would be if they have a chance to have home court, it increases their chance of maybe knocking off the Warriors. So I get why they're going to feel pressure to win games, even though they're in February or whatever. But they're going to have to be super cautious with this. As with any hamstring injury in any sport, the danger of re-injuring it is real. And it's important to point out, they said they're going to reevaluate him in 2 weeks. That means they're probably going to put him back in the MRI machine. It doesn't mean he's going to be back in 2 weeks. And that's something that they're going to have to sell, not just to the fans, but to James himself.
No, that's a great point, Brian, as Brian Windhorst is with us. When people say 2 weeks, they think, oh, he's back in 2 weeks. No, that's just the process of where he may be in 2 weeks, which may mean it could be a little longer. Speaking of longer, Spurs' Greg Popovich has been around a long time, wins his 1,176th game, becoming the 5th winningest coach in NBA history. You know, we talked about this a little bit earlier on the show, and I get it. It's different eras when you had no free agency, and what, you know, Red Auerbach could do with the Celtics and what John Wooden could do with UCLA and what Bear Bryant could do with Alabama. But when you have what Belichick is doing now in the NFL, what Nick Saban is doing in college basketball, and what a guy like Greg Popovich has been able to do in the NBA with so many transitions of players and winning rings over different periods of time. We talked about this maybe potentially in this free agent era that we're in, being the golden age of coaches. What is it about Pop that makes him so willing and acceptable to find different pieces in place and find different ways to win?
Right. Well, it's a great point. It's a great comment on his legacy. I will say this. He has to thank goodness for Kawhi Leonard, because I do think it was his intention to retire with Tim Duncan, and Kawhi Leonard has breathed new life in his career. And the best thing you can say about Greg Popovich is he is progressive. Not only progressive in the way he plays, but progressive in the way he operates his entire franchise. So, yes, they've been a leader in innovation on how they play, going from big to small. Now, while the whole league's playing small, they're playing big again. Look at them trying to lead the way again. But also the other things that they do. For example, putting Becky Hammon on his coaching staff, being progressive in that area, leading the way in that area. They've been at the forefront in using sports science on their guys. They've been at the forefront in developing other techniques. Greg Popovich is a progressive in every sense of the word. He is not a guy who is saying back in my day. He never tells everybody about, oh, yeah, back in my day at the Air Force Academy, we got up at 4 a.m., blah, blah, blah. Instead, he asks, what can I do tomorrow? I think that's a lesson for all of us. We can all learn a lot from Greg Popovich, but one of the ways he approaches it is, yes, his experience and his wisdom and his ability to draw on what's happened in the past is a huge asset to him. But he challenges himself and the whole organization to be ahead of the curve. And that is why the Spurs, despite challenges in the NBA where they haven't been able to draft highly and they haven't been able to be a major free agent player for the most part, have continued to be a great team for 20 years.
So again, this is a regular season wins a record
Right.
We're talking about. He's 5th. Don Nelson is first. Popovich is 159 wins behind him. Do you think when Pop is done, he has the record?
He will. I would say this about my old colleague George Karl and Dick Mott and all those guys. Don't look at just the win numbers. Look at the losses. Pop has a hell of a lot fewer losses than the guys on that list. His winning percentage is damn impressive. So you always got to be careful with the counting stats. But I don't think anybody would dispute that Greg Popovich is one of the greatest coaches of all time, arguably the greatest coach.
Actually, that's a great point when you look at the losses, because Gene Shue was a guy for a lot of years that had a bunch of wins, but he had a ton of losses.
Yeah, Lenny Wilkins has a ton of losses.
You have to put it. That's a great point, Brian. You have to look at not only how much did they win, but what was their winning percentage in those games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but my guess is Pop's efficiency is pretty darn good. I mean, they have an incredible, I can't remember, it's something like 18 or something straight 50-win seasons except for the lockout year. I mean, you win 50 games. Not only do you win 50 games, but you win 50 games every year, extending Tim Duncan's career by sitting him. That was another thing that Pop and the Spurs pioneered. Now we see guys resting all the time. When Greg Popovich would say, hey, we're not putting Timmy on the plane to fly to Utah for this game, people thought he was crazy. But you know what? Tim Duncan, who had bad knees, was an All-NBA player at age 38. They extended the window and got 5 titles with him. And so with Popovich, not only pioneering resting and maximizing for the long run and still racking up these win totals year after year in the 50s. I mean, they won 60. They won their greatest years of their team history last year. Won over 60 games. I mean, they are a tremendous example of not only intelligence but longevity. And Popovich is no doubt the leader.
All right, Wendy, we appreciate the time this morning. Looking forward to Isaiah going all the way back to the beginning. Isaiah Thomas, when he becomes a regular fixture in that lineup, and just where that's going to take this Cleveland Cavalier team. Wendy.
And it will be a great game tonight, even without Isaiah. These two organizations do not like each other.
No question. We look forward to that. Again, it's the first game in Boston since Kyrie Irving went. They started the season with the win the Cavs had over the Celtics in Cleveland, and now LeBron and company will be in Boston tonight. You'll be part of the broadcast tonight on ESPN. Brian, we appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Brian Windhorst with us. All right, coming up earlier, we had John Gruden on the show, and he was very forthright. I mean, he didn't pull any punches when we asked him all the questions about that. We'll get into that. We'll give you some of the highlights of that and a little something else, too, coming up next. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Continuing with you on this Wednesday morning, Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. Trey Wingo, Mike Golic. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And, Mike, we're bracing for Winter Storm Brady. Coming up here to the northeast coast, but people across this country are in a bitter freeze, and it's already sort of impacting Florida. It is snowing in Jacksonville, Florida, and Tallahassee, Florida right now.
That's amazing.
That's insane.
Yeah, it really is.
And Ginger Z, who does the weather for Good Morning America, and actually worked with us on NFL Live and SportsCenter when the Super Bowl 48 was in New York, and we were outside in Herald Square in our set down there. So got to work with her a little bit there. It is actually colder in Jacksonville, Florida right now than it is in parts of Alaska.
Is that with the wind chill?
Hold on.
Oh, you're going to sneeze. Is that with the wind chill? Okay.
No, wind chill's a Jedi mind trick. Don't fall for it.
What does that mean?
The temperature is the temperature.
No, it's not. When the wind blows, it's colder. When you're standing,
it's not colder. It feels colder.
That's exactly right. That's wind chill.
The temperature is the same. The temperature is the same.
That's why it says feels like. That's wind chill.
But that's not what it is. They're sort of adjusting for what it goes.
Who cares?
Don't fall for it.
Oh, no, I'm falling for it. If I stand outside and it's 32 degrees and I'm standing there and the wind's blowing on me and it says feels like 25, you know what it feels like? 25 degrees.
Only
That's
because
how
they're
cold
making
it is.
you think that.
No,
just
not at
go
all.
with what the temperature is.
No. If I'm standing in 32.
It's 32.
And then I go somewhere else and I'm standing in 32 and it's really windy and it feels like 25. You know what I am? I'm colder.
But what's the
because
temperature?
It feels like 25.
What's the temperature?
It feels like 25 degrees.
It's the same temperature.
No, it is not the same. It's not the same. When the wind's blowing on you, it's not the same temperature.
This is people just trying to get in your grill, man. You got to be mentally stronger than this.
You can't be this dumb.
You got to be mentally. You can't be this soft. You got to be mentally stronger than this.
No, it's not about soft.
32 is 32. It's here. It's here, Mike. It's in your head. It's all in your grill.
What don't you understand about wind?
I'm not falling for it. I'm not falling for the meteorological Jedi mind trick. The AMS seal not having any of it.
The who?
AMS, American Meteorological Society.
Oh, okay.
I had to do weather a couple of times in my first
Did you
job.
really?
Yeah. And we had an Alberta clipper coming down and pushing things across.
So you were in front of the whole green screen thing and had the clicker and such?
It was horrible. Yeah.
Really?
We had a news anchor, a weather guy, who, by the way, is now a local weather guy here.
Where was it?
Binghamton, New York.
Binghamton, New York.
Yeah.
We need that tape.
No, it doesn't exist.
Binghamton, New York. We need the tape, the video of Trey doing weather.
I think I did it like 2 or 3 times.
Really?
It was horrible. It was really horrible.
Is there any chance it exists?
Probably not. I don't think I even recorded it because I knew how bad it was going to be.
Wow. Hembo, find that video.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Binghamton, New York.
We had a sports guy, a news person, and a weather person, and 2 reporters. And when someone was sick, Guess
I was
what?
just going to say, you weren't the weather guy, right?
No, I was the sports guy.
You were the sports guy, but you had to do weather.
My weather guy was a guy named Bob Maxon, who now works at NBC 30
Oh, really?
here. Yeah,
Bob. Okay, I know Bob. I don't know Bob.
Yeah, but because you watch
I know of Bob.
Now, this means nothing to 90% of the people listening or watching, but at the same time, in Binghamton, New York, myself, Carl Ravitch, who does college basketball and baseball tonight for us, Bob Maxon, who's now a local weather guy here, and Bill Pito, who used to be here, now works at MSG. All of us were in Binghamton, New York at the same time.
So let me ask you that, right? Let me ask you that. That is very cool. Yeah. But let me ask you this. You're a sports guy. Bob Maxon was a weather guy.
Right.
If you had to, for one day, you walked into work, and as you were getting ready to prepare, they said, Trey, you're doing the weather today. Bob, you're doing the sports today. Who would have it harder?
Oh, Bob would destroy me. Bob would have been much better at sports than I would have been at weather. Not even close. Bob used to actually go out and shoot highlights for me.
All right, forgetting Bob being good at it, weatherman, sports guy, flip the jobs, which would be harder to do?
Well, for me, because I'm not a scientist, I'm just a caveman.
Are weathermen really scientists? Okay,
now,
or are they reading off the computer of what's going on and then putting it up on the graphic and just repeating
it? This was, first of all, if you're a meteorologist, you have an actual degree. Secondly,
and how hard is that to get? Can you get it online?
No, this was the 80s. There was no online. Okay,
okay, that's true.
There was nothing.
That's true.
We didn't even have a teleprompter at this station.
Is there a meteorological or whatever tech school?
They sent down maps via the satellite. We just put them up and made some things up. I mean, it was crazy.
So you're saying you had to go to school for it?
Absolutely.
Or it wasn't just a 3-credit class?
When you do the green screen, it's all backwards.
Right.
So you're looking this way, and what should be east is west, and west is east, and you're like,
that has to be harder than actually pulling the because come on, seriously. The weather's right there on the computer, right? And
we had no computers.
All the information.
We got it off the AP wire
machine. Whatever it was given to you, and you just put up the info, right?
No, see, it's
not like you were out there with a thermometer doing your own thing, okay?
It's much more complicated. It's much more complicated than that. I bow to weather people.
Right.
Because you got to worry about a Chinook and Alberta. A Chinook, it's a snow eater wind that comes out of western parts of Canada. Oh. Then you have your Alberta Clipper, which comes across, and then you have the moisture maker, which comes up the east coast and draws the moisture off the water and circles it back in over the frozen mass that comes down from Canada.
Did you learn all this in your 2 times as being a weatherman?
Well, I watch weather every once in a while. Every time there's a big storm, don't you watch the Weather Channel?
Well, I watch and I get disgusted at how giddy the Bob Maxons of the world are.
Bob Maxon.
Maxon, I'm sorry.
Bob's my guy.
Yeah,
Bob's my guy.
Sorry, Bob. That's my fault.
Yeah. Well, we got completely off rails there. But it was doing the weather was very hard, especially when you had no equipment. Separate issue entirely. By the way, the Bills will feel right at home Sunday in Jacksonville.
Well, there you go. Yeah, if it snows,
that's the best thing we got for the Bills.
Good point.
As it's going to be a little chilly down there, we believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to what we actually should be talking about, which is sports. We had John Gruden, who's our Monday Night Football analyst, still on the show earlier.
Right.
He's calling the wild card game for us on ESPN, which will be simulcast on ABC.
Saturday.
Titans Saturday. Said that, meant that, knew that. As the Titans were in Kansas City take on the Chiefs, and of course his name has been reported that he's going to be the next head coach of the Oakland Raiders. And you flat out asked him if he gets the offer, will he take it?
I think there's a good chance. I'm excited about where I am in terms of studying the game and prepared to come back and coach. I just don't want to sit here and speculate, and it's almost like I don't know what's going to happen, Mike. I got to be honest with you. It's been a long couple weeks. I know they've gone through their process of interviewing candidates, and until they're done, I won't know, but I did have a good meeting with Mark. I've known him a long time and got a lot of respect for the Raider football organization.
Listen, the bottom line is if you're doing the interview, that means you want the job, right?
Yeah.
You're interviewing for the job. And I think a lot of us find it hard to believe, outside of them not coming to terms on a contract, that Mark Davis is going to offer John Gruden the job. And when he does, John Gruden is going to accept the job and become the head coach of the Oakland Raiders.
And, of course, one of the things that had been reported about that, not only would he be getting $1 gazillion a year, he would also reportedly get ownership, which really sets off a really interesting dynamic and a slippery slope for people like Bill Belichick or Pete Carroll with all the success he's had in Seattle and all these longtime established head coaches around the NFL.
Or for when Sean McVay wins the next 4 Super Bowls and his contract comes up, and then he wants ownership.
Big chunk of that, please. So I asked him point blank, is ownership part of the negotiations?
There's no truth to that at all. I heard Stephen Smith screaming at me on TV yesterday on one of his shows.
Well, he does that to everybody, just so you know.
That's one of the most that has. There's no validity to that at all. None, zero. So that's a nice segment that I saw, but no ownership. That's for sure.
So again, putting to rest the issue that there will be a ownership part of this. That's straight from John, saying that would not be the case should this go the way that we both think it's going to go, that him taking the Raiders job.
Yeah, I that was interesting because as much as we love John, or it didn't even have to be John. You could tell me any person, is going to make $10 million a year and have some ownership. I would say make all the money you can. But there's no way if I were an owner in the league, and again, it would have to be approved by the owners or a majority of the owners, that why would they want to put themselves in that situation?
Why would they want to go down that road?
No way they'd want to open that Pandora's box. So while Mark Davis can want to do that all he wants, it would have to be approved, and I don't think it would ever get approved. But as you heard John Gruden say, there's no truth to that whatsoever. So I think now it's just a matter of when, not if, he's going to be named the head coach of the Oakland Raiders. Will they wait till after this game? Will we know before this game and he can sign off, after this wild card game and say, thanks for the memories and move on? But it looks like he'll be back in the silver and black. I think the fans there will be very excited because, let's break it down from a coach's standpoint. His winning percentage was good. What was it? 54. The winning percentage
he was plus 500
in the mid. Plus 500, and has a Super Bowl without question. But it's that aura of John Gruden now, isn't it? I mean, that people love his fire, his passion. He's extremely popular, and I think that's part of it as well for the Raiders. Of you got to play another year or two in a city where you're leaving, so you want the fans to still be engaged. And coming off of 2 years ago, you were ready for this year to be a big year for the Raiders, and it wasn't. But they have a lot of good pieces in place there. So if John can keep the interest going from the fan side and, win on that field like they did a couple of years ago and then bring that excitement to Vegas, I think that's exactly what the Raiders are shooting for. So, again, we all think it's just a matter of when, not if. John Gruden becomes the next head coach of the Oakland Raiders.
Well, the interesting thing there too is that for a while it looked like Tampa might be the landing spot, but Dirk Cutter is coming back.
Right.
How much of that is because they felt like John Gruden was going to the Raiders instead of back to Tampa? That's interesting. But if John Gruden does, and the if there is in air quotes because we both think it's going to happen, his 16-season gap between coaching that team will be the largest gap in NFL history, and this is important, with the same team. Coaching stints on the same team. Because it would be 16 years. Now, Joe Gibbs came back. He left in 92 and came back in 2004 for Washington. The biggest gap probably in just NFL coaching would be Dick Vermeil, who left, I think, in 82 or 83 with the Eagles and then came back in 96.
Worked out pretty well, too, didn't it?
Worked out very well for him. Won a Super Bowl with the Rams with the greatest show on turf, 23-16 over the Tennessee Titans in Super Bowl 34, and then was ushered out for Mike Martz and then really realized he wasn't done. Went on to have a very successful run in Kansas City. And by the way, was a part of ignominiously the only at that point. I'm not sure if it's still the same. I think it might be the only punt-free playoff game in NFL history.
Oh wow!
Well,
nice memory.
Thank you. They played the Colts, and I think it was 41-38 was the final score. 41-35. At that point, it was the first playoff game ever without a punt. Vermeil's gap was 82-97.
82. Okay,
in that ballpark. So. Yeah.
That's a long gap. And then to come back and be as successful as he was.
To win it was the best part.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that because I was in St. Louis when he got hired there. We had the Dick Vermeil press conference at noon, and we ran it on the noon news. And within 5 minutes, he had laughed, cried, and swore 3 times.
Yeah.
And people were like, we need to get this off the air. But that's who Dick is. I mean, he's one of the most emotionally raw guys of all time. He's great. He will tell you exactly how he's feeling at all times.
And that probably happened every day from there on.
More than likely.
Inside the facility. But back to where we originally started, I don't think there's any doubt that you have or I have that John Gruden is going to end up coaching the Raiders. A matter of, I don't know when they'll announce it, whenever I guess however they want to time it out, right? With he has to call a game Saturday. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or getting the contract done or where they are with that.
I think, what time's the game start? 4:20? It was 3.5 hours, 7:50.
Yeah.
Let's go with 7:50.
You mean extra long goodbye to Sean McDonough at the end of that game?
Let's give him 8:15.
Yeah, there you go.
8:15 Saturday. We'll find out that John Gruden's probably going to be the next head coach of the Raiders. All right. Coming up, a ridiculous note about one of this weekend's NFL playoff games, which is really remarkable.
Yes, it is.
That's next. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2, Traffic and Weather together.
Golic and Wingo reminding you to check out the Stephen A. Smith Show. Hear what he's fired up about now. Weekdays from 1 to 3 Eastern on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, Sirius XM, and TuneIn Radio. And catch up with Stephen A. Smith Show podcast on demand on the ESPN app and TuneIn.
Speaking of the podcast you're talking about, it's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. You can hear our entire conversation with John Gruden on the Golic and Wingo podcast. And again, shout out to Cliff as we're entering the last segment of the show, Closing Time by Semisonic.
There you go. I like that a lot.
Nicely done. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's Wild Card Weekend coming up. We're excited about that in the NFL, which will be a perfect segue to lead us into the College Football National Championship game on Monday, where we will be there. But according to Elias, Saturday, this is crazy. You go ahead and spill this one for us. This is amazing.
This is great. So Falcons-Rams game, it's going to mark the 5th time in postseason history that a team's head coach is younger than the opponent's starting quarterback.
That's crazy.
Sean McVay, head coach of the Rams,
31,
is younger than Matt Ryan, the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons.
32.
Unreal. Let's go back to the other ones. 2008. Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Steelers, going against Kurt Warner, quarterback of the Rams. So Tomlin younger than Kurt Warner. 1993, Bill Cowher playing against a team quarterbacked by Joe Montana. Cowher younger than Montana. Now you're going back 1970 and 1969. 2 times the head coach was John Madden. In 1969, the opposing quarterback, Len Dawson. In 1970, the opposing quarterback, Johnny Unitas, and Madden was younger than both of them. That's really an amazing thing.
It really is. And of those matchups, Mike Tomlin as the head coach in Super Bowl 43 was the only one to win that playoff matchup. And that was a great game in Tampa down that year. By the way, I think some of those clips from those promos we did was you and I on NFL Live.
Yes, it was. It was.
That was really
gosh.
Good. But that game was 27-23, and the great Santonio Holmes catch. And the thing I remember most about that game is that there were 2 chances that Santonio had to catch the game-winning touchdown against the Cardinals in that game. He missed the easier catch and came up with the tougher catch, the unbelievable catch to win it. And had the Cardinals gone on to win that game, Larry Fitzgerald would have been the MVP. He was just ridiculous with that long touchdown to put them ahead. But what does it say? I mean, we actually had Jed York, on the show on NFL Live for Super Bowl 47. In New Orleans, when he was younger than most of the players, and he was the owner of some of the players. He was younger than some of the players. He was the owner of the team.
It's amazing.
It's an amazing dynamic.
So, what do you think of that? I mean, listen, we'll start hitting some of the wild card games a lot more heavier tomorrow. But the only winner was Cowher over Montana. Could we get McVay? Oh, I'm sorry, Tomlin winning
Warner.
over Kurt Warner. Could we get, you think, McVay at home?
That's a home game.
At home, playing against Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons, last year's team in the Super Bowl.
I'd feel better about it if I felt like the Falcons' offense was in sync. I feel better about Matt Ryan continuing that trend of the older quarterback getting the younger
winning,
coach.
Yeah.
I just, even though they won that game, 22-10, I think, in the week 17 against Carolina, that offense has just not been right for 3 or 4 weeks. I agree.
And the pass rush he's going to face, Matt Ryan, from that front four from the Rams.
You get Brockers and Aaron Donald collapsing that pocket.
The running game with Gurley and how he's catching the ball out of the backfield as well. I do like the Rams in this game. I do think this could be the second time the younger coach wins this one over the older quarterback.
Well, they did it. They rested a lot of their players.
Yeah, they did.
In that final game of the regular season against San Francisco. And, they want those guys rested and ready to roll. Speaking of ready to roll, this from ESPN Buffalo reporter Mike Rodecker does a great job with us on his coverage of the Bills. Head coach Sean McDermott said this morning that running back LaShawn McCoy with that right ankle injury will not practice, but will take it one day at a time about whether McCoy practices this week. On Tuesday, Adam Schefter said that McCoy is going to be a game-time decision and a close call for that playoff game.
Listen, as I've always talked about, injuries, it depends on the position you play. If it's a big old defensive tackle that has a bad ankle, you know what? We play in 5-10 yards of a square area, right? Where we're not cutting like running backs do. You probably could get away with it being a little worse, but still playing. A running back, shady, running the ball, trying to catch the ball out of the backfield on a bad ankle, different story. I'm Obviously, it's a monster. I may have taken him at least 80% of the time in my DraftKings lineup every week.
Right.
Taking that guy.
So, you know it was coming.
I mean, what a loss that would be if he can't play in that game.
Look, Phillip Rivers once played an AFC Championship game with a torn ACL because he was a quarterback.
Playing a pocket quarterback to boot.
Can't do that well. All right, Dan Le Batard show is next. Stugatz will join us tomorrow. And by the way, folks, it's in your mind. Don't buy the wind chill myth. I'm going to go now.
Shut up.